Soaring high upon a sea of clouds, there live countless beasts of gargantuan proportions, and upon them live all things, and all things are dying out. Soon there will be only clouds. With that comforting foreword, I am the HearthGuy, and this is Alrest, the setting of Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the most underappreciated world of the Xenoblade trilogy. With a sharp change from the style of both storytelling and design of the original Xenoblade Chronicles, the second game unfortunately got a lot more flack than I feel it ever deserved. It has some of the highest peaks out of any of the games, along with some of the lowest lows, but that's not the subject of this video. Today, we're going to have a breakdown of the themes, lore, setting, and partial story of the world of Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Or, at least, the first part. There's a lot to cover. A world of living continents called Titans, circling the world tree which pierces the sky at the heart of a great cloud sea. Throughout its history, nations have risen and fallen in tandem with the Titans, and when the Titans die, they become core crystals. These core crystals hold data, memories, and impressions of personality. When these core crystals come into contact with a compatible person, the data from the individual is passed into the crystal, and it turns into a blade. A living being comprised of flesh and ether, tied to the creature that awoke them as a driver. Driver and blade work and live together until the driver's death, when the blade returns to their core crystal and lose their memories, as a slate wiped clean. However, an impression of their past life and their past driver remains within the data of the crystal. This in turn makes the data more complex, and in turn makes the blade more complex and powerful in their next awakening. Eventually, this cycle reaches a conclusion. The blade, after lifetimes of individual and soon forgotten lives, incubates and transforms into a Titan, and once more loses their memories as a blade. And so, from the Titans and the data they collected, life flourishes, and so the cycle continues. The world of Alrest works off symbiosis. Titans give life during their times and afterwards become blades, who bond with the life that live upon a Titan's back, which deepens the data of the blade's crystal and leads to them becoming Titans, and so begins again. This symbiosis, this grand dance of life, may seem rather fortuitous, as without even a single piece of this puzzle, then it could not have continued. That is because it was all well designed, by an architect. The architect set about the world in this way for a purpose, and it fulfilled that purpose for quite some time, until one man dared to see his creator, a man who hated the world and himself, a man who wanted answers, a man named Amalthus. Amalthus was born to a single mother, it seems, far from the homeland of his people, the Indoline. But at a young age, he would be separated from his mother when bandits attacked his home, and his mother was forced to throw him from a cliff to keep him away from their pursuers. Not my first instinct, but hey, I'm not a parent. Though his mother was successful in drawing the bandits away from Amalthus, she would lose her life in the process. In searching for her, he would find her dead near the sleeping bandits who did it, and Amalthus would return the favor. Years later, Amalthus would grow and try to do what he could to help others who had their lives torn apart by war and bloodshed. Paired up with the likes of Minoth, a flesh-eater, blades who, whether willingly or not, were made to consume or be combined with human blood. Minoth and Amalthus would work together, somewhat begrudgingly, but they helped those they could. But even then, Amalthus saw the same kinds of people, this time hidden beneath a kind smile. Walking in on a man who he helped and bandaged before, now murdering a couple and nearly killing their baby. Amalthus was too late to save the parents. He made the mistake of saving the man. This time, he did the only thing he could think of to save the child from a life in the world he saw as a hell. Minoth and Amalthus would part ways after that, and Amalthus would go looking for his god. Amalthus climbed the world tree looking for answers, but he did not find his creator. The architect did not appear to him. But that doesn't mean Amalthus didn't find an answer to his question. Within the world tree, where Elysium, the mythical birthplace of mankind, is supposed to be, Amalthus found nothing. He did not find Elysium. He did not find the architect. Instead, he found two crystals, two core crystals, as it was to them and the architect that the data within all core crystals flowed, information on all life and all of Alrest, serving as the lens by which the architect viewed the world. What he saw disheartened him. He saw a world of people making the same mistakes over and over again, never moving on from their past. I stated in my last video that each entry of the Xenoblade trilogy deals with some point of our time in life. Where the first game dealt with the future, the second tackles the past, or rather, the effects the past have on us now. A fact we will see again and again as we continue. It was due to the people of the world not learning from their own past that the architect made no move to prevent Amalthus from taking the core crystals, and he watched as Amalthus took them back down to Alrest. The architect was a smart man. No doubt he could have guessed what would happen next. Naturally, like any core crystal, these two could be attuned to, and Amalthus took one and did just that. But it wasn't just a basic blade that awoke from the crystal, no. It would be a blade far beyond anything the world had ever seen. The blade that would foretell the end of all life. The Endbringer. Malos. Malos' first thoughts would have been consumed by the very same hatred that consumed Amalthus, as was natural for a blade, and their time together would only solidify this within Malos' mind. Amalthus pointed the raw power of Malos at anything he wanted, and they would be erased, all in service to the nation that Amalthus called home. Indal, a theocracy led by a praetor in service and worship of the architect. Amalthus had risen in prominence since returning with Malos and the other core crystal, as both Malos' power and Amalthus' deed of climbing the world tree were seen as gifts from the architect. Amalthus' position allowed him to suggest and implement things like a refugee protection policy. So even though there were those who disliked the upstart Amalthus' rise, they said nothing. Even when Malos destroyed an ancient relic called the Aegis and took the name for himself, making it the moniker of both him and his twin core crystal, the praetor did nothing. Because Indal could get something from Malos. His power was unrivaled, and when Indal, along with the emerging power of Mor Ardain, declared war on the nation of Sia, Malos sunk the Titan by his power alone. It was so destructive and cataclysmic that Indal tried to keep Malos' involvement a secret. At least, until Malos would abandon Amalthus. Determining that there was nothing more for him to glean alongside Amalthus, and having come to a conclusion himself about what they both wanted, he had seen and was born from Amalthus' hatred of life and the world, and from his own experience he felt it too. So perhaps to thank his driver, or to act out what he thought was his purpose, he declared a war of extermination upon Alrest itself. As an Aegis, his power eclipsed most other blades, and he realized his ability to call upon mechanical servants called artifices, from Elysium high above. With his personal army and his natural ability to degrade and destroy whatever he wanted, he began eviscerating the Titans of Alrest. Amalthus, seeing what Malos was doing, realized he had to find someone who could awaken the second Aegis crystal. Not because he actually cared, no, he actually figured that Malos' rampage was divine will from the architect, but he still had to put up a good face of trying to stop Malos. Knowing that he himself either couldn't control it or that he would just create a second Malos, he sought out someone with a truer spirit than himself, and in so doing, he found Adam, Prince of Torna. Torna, also called the Golden Country, was perhaps the most prosperous of the Titan nations, but it had a long past of conquest and subjugation of its neighbors. In recent generations, the Titan they called home had part of its body sealed away to prevent anyone from abusing the Titan's destructive power, but all of Torna still bears the shame of those past atrocities. Adam was the illegitimate son of the current king of Torna, born from a woman of the Leftherian archipelago, a sleepy place with a small population known for their golden eyes. Adam was given something of a backwater part of Torna to call home, a place out of the way due to the politicking of Torna's capital and especially his uncle, Prince Zetter, who often looked down on Adam and wanted the fame he had. Adam was loved by his people and renowned as a warrior and diplomat, making friends with the ruler of the nearby emerging power that was the Empire of Mor Ardain, Hugo Ardenach, And once the Aegis had rejected Adam's uncle, it was not hard for Amalthus to place the second Aegis crystal into Adam's hands. From Adam's desire to save humanity, but also his fear of the Aegis's power, the Aegis that would be born would at first not be too different from Malos. But she'd be different enough. Her name was Mithra, and she would not be terribly impressed by humanity upon first awakening. Mithra would have many deficiencies, from a volatile and arrogant personality to looking down on humanity to somehow creating nuclear hazards in the attempt of cooking. Don't worry about it. And these things could easily be seen as reflections of Adam himself and his fear for what the Aegis could do. While he cared for Mithra like a daughter, he never did get her to open herself up completely, nor could he bring himself to unconditionally accept her due to that fear. They still got along and cared for each other. There was always a certain distance, one they both were aware of. Adam's ward, Milton, would help bridge that gap to a degree, becoming like a son to Adam and a brother to Mithra. Together, Adam formed a militia with the purpose of fighting Malos. Meanwhile, he traveled to further learn about and realize Mithra's power. In the process, they would discover Mithra's own artifices, Siren and Ophion, and they would happen upon a certain duo that would be deceptively impactful. Many years prior to this point, Torna possessed a spectacular blade, Jin, the paragon of Torna, who was passed from one great knight of Torna to the next. Jin's most recent life had been beside a woman named Ornelia, who he had loved and lived with until she grew old. But Jin was conflicted. While he had enjoyed the life he shared with Ornelia, he wondered if a future Jin would have regrets, and desire not to forget whoever his current driver became. So, to give a gift to his future self, Jin not only wrote a journal, but also wrote within it the secrets of the Flesh Eaters. The predecessors of Indal was Judicium, which was a technological juggernaut that weaponized titans and sought ways to create the ultimate eternal blade, unable to be defeated even if their driver were to die. This led them to Flesh Eater technology. However, Judicium itself would collapse, likely under the weight of their own power, and the titan they called home, Temperantia, would die and float for millennia in the cloud sea, barren. But while its people lived on as the Indaline, forming around a society built on faith in the architect rather than in mortal hands, they continued the study of their forefathers' techniques. This included Flesh Eater technology, which Jin somehow learned in his time as Ornelia's blade. The information Jin wrote in this book would, however, be near lost to time, as his core alone was taken back to the palace after Ornelia's death, and her home and all within was left to rot. But Jin's core crystal would not stay in the palace for long, as it would soon be stolen by a man named Gort. But Gort would not attune with it. Instead, by accident, it would attune with a little girl named Laura, who was the daughter of the woman Gort was attached to at the time. Jin's first memory in this new life was cutting off the arm of Gort, who was trying to kill Laura for awakening Jin. And his first words would be an oath to her.
From now on, I'll protect you. I'll keep you safe. Always.
Years would pass and Laura and Jin would become an excellent duo, fighting to get by on Torna and elsewhere while searching for Laura's mother, who she was separated from years prior. In the interim, Jin and Laura had developed a fighting style wholly unique to the world. See, before, drivers and blades had either fought side by side or the blade would fight for the driver. Since blades can heal from any damage and had incredible elemental powers, it makes sense that they'd be on the front lines. Well, since Laura and Jin were, how do I put this nicely, poor, they didn't have enough money for multiple weapons. Instead, they learned to trade Jin's sword in combat, which he naturally came with as a blade. This developed into a style of Jin passing the weapon to Laura and him channeling power through her, resulting in greater synergy as well as what appears to be a higher level of resonance between driver and blade than had been accomplished ever before. Of course, these two wouldn't really notice this at first. During Malos' rampage, Laura and Jin would run across a burnt-out village, destroyed not by Malos or the artifices, but by people. People who had taken advantage of the chaos to round up refugees and sell them into slavery, and just, be jerks. But while the village is merely a husk now, they do find one survivor, a young boy named Mikhail. Without a home to go to, as his home was one of the titans already sunk by Malos, Jin and Laura agree to take him in as part of their family. And as they travel across Torna, they find further signs of Malos' destruction, gaping craters where the ground has been burned to blackened heaps. It's at one of these sites that they are ambushed by one of Malos' artifices, a gargoyle. They put up a fight, but they wind up being saved by Adam and Mithra, the former of which quickly recognizes Jin as the long-lost paragon of Torna. With Jin on edge and Mithra ready for a fight, combat ensues between the two pairs. Instead of ending with Mithra incinerating them, Jin and Laura actually manage to impress and amuse Adam. And thanks to Milton arriving with Laura's other blade, Hayes, tension de-escalates. One thing leads to another, and soon enough the two groups have agreed to travel together. Adam is still traveling with the purpose of expanding Mithra's horizons, honing her powers, and tracking Malos, and as well as softening her rougher edges. And he empathizes with Laura's search for her mother. Not to mention he is fascinated with their sword-passing technique, as he begins to study it from afar. An interesting note about Hayes, Laura's other blade, she possesses a particularly rare ability that allows her to dampen the powers of other blades, which Adam recognizes would be invaluable to the fight against Malos. So, taking all that into account, he decides to go with them, while also trying to convince them to join him. However, when they arrive on the Titan of Gormott, once more they discover devastation and loss. The village was worn down and lost, with all its residents dead. The only body not below ground is that of a man who died burying the bodies of the others. And here Laura finds her mother's necklace, last remnant of a mother she lost long ago. To make matters worse, they are soon accosted by Ardanian troops, who mistake them for brigands who attack the village, led by the flaming blue blade, Brigid. Thankfully, the subsequent fight is broken up before Mithra can carpet bomb anyone, but not before Brigid, Laura, and pretty much everyone damages her ego. To Adam's delight, the one who interrupts is Hugo, Emperor of Morardane and Adam's old friend, who is out in search for Malos like Adam. Alongside him are the twin jewels of Morardane, Brigid, as mentioned before, and Aegeon, who, like Jin, are blades with ancient histories. While separated from the rest, Laura visits her mother's grave, only to be met by a shadow from her past. Gort, hired out by Amalthus to track down core crystals. While saved by Jin, who makes Gort's left and right sides match, Laura lets Gort go, partially because she didn't want to end it in front of her mother's grave, and in part because he did take care of her mother years ago. As for Gort, well, he runs into some friendly faces from Indal, including a certain scientist.
Stop it!
I'm sure he's fine. With Laura's past settled for now, she can focus upon joining Adam's resistance against Malos, returning to Torna to do so. Here they arrive in Aletta, Adam's hometown, and here we can see glimmers of the kind of person Adam really is. Kind, thoughtful, and protective of his people. However, just before coming there, Adam opens up to Laura about his insecurities. In fact, the only reason they headed to Aletta was because the King of Araya, where Adam's militia was stationed, betrayed Adam's trust and sent his militia back to Torna. With his frustration clear, Adam reveals to Laura the root of his insecurities: Mithra. He reveals he's always worried due to Mithra's incredible power, a power he does not have full control over. With a wave of his hand, he could have killed Jin and Laura, and far more, as Malos has shown already. Laura is able to ease his worries a bit, telling him that Mithra is also holding back to make sure she doesn't wind up like Malos, but it only puts Adam's mind at ease for a time.
If only time would slow down and afford me the chance.
While on their way to the capital of Torna and accosted by a random monster, as is prone to happen in Xenoblade, they're helped by Minoth. Minoth, hearing about Adam's resistance, sought them out independent of Amalthus, who he hadn't seen in 2 years since the event involving the murdered couple just before Amalthus climbed the World Tree. With their team filled out, plus Milton and Mikhail because they literally have nowhere else to go, they wind up in Hyber Village, where Jin and Ornelia once lived together. After being recognized by a local from years ago, Jin finds the ruins of his old life and finds a photo of himself, Ornelia, and likely friends from that prior life. He also finds a book. A book that tells him the secrets of carving his driver's life onto his own. Laura doesn't notice Jin reading a book on horrible abominations in the eyes of God and man, but she does notice the photograph, and with a spark of inspiration, she gathers up her group, a little family in the making, and takes a photo. There's a lot of pain in this photo. Adam's conflicting fear and care for Mithra, Mithra's self-ostracization due to her relation to Malos and the power she holds, Mikhail and Milton's prior loss of family, the weight of an empire on Hugo's shoulders, and Minoth's conflicted past as both a flesh-eater and former partner to Amalthus. In spite of this, there is the start of a family in this ragtag bunch, bound together out of hope for the future, even as their own pasts dog them. Onward they march to the capital of Torna, where the king, his brother, who hates Adam, and Amalthus all wait. However, prepare all they can, they are still not ready for what Malos brings down onto Torna. Under a reign of gargoyles and destruction, Adam and the others fend off Malos himself, who has opted to show himself to personally steal the key to Torna's Titan's restraints, hoping to reawaken it. Why? Because it's amusing. He could just blow up the Titan with an artifice, but he'd rather make a game out of it, to break the tedium of sending humanity to their deaths. As to why he's doing that, he's of the opinion that humans are so good at destroying themselves and wasting their lives that he might as well push them over the edge that they are already cartwheeling next to. To be exact,
they see the divine flame of life and piss over it. They're genius at that. In a class all of their own, really.
Malos.
Oh, that flame is wasted on them. So I want to give them a little push in the right direction. As the benevolent servant of our wise dad should.
things aren't hopeless yet, as Adam and crew are saved by Azurda, a small and actually speaking Titan that acts as a protector to the Tornan royal family, and the blades which are in the process of incubating into Titans within the Tornan Titan. As far as we know, Torna is a rare Titan old enough to actually accommodate this, since by the time of the main game there's no other Titans doing it, although there could be other reasons for that, which we'll get to. While they recover, Laura is granted knighthood by the King of Torna for her bravery. Prince Zeder was being told by Amalthus that Malus' destruction was an act of divine will in a total mask-off moment, and Jin receives the opposite treatment from Azurda. Azurda tells Jin the pros and cons of life as a blade and titan, and prompts him to contemplate what it would mean to outlive Laura, and the prospects of forming new relationships. For an 800-year-old titan like Azurda, a being which Jin and all other blades are bound to eventually become, he finds solace in knowing that, over time, and even with the loss of loved ones, he'll be ready for new connections. Jin, however, feels no such desire. All he wants is this one life with Laura. With the danger ever present, Adam leaves Milton and Mikhail in the Tornan capital, much to Milton's dismay, and while both he and Jin try to get them to accept it, it's Mithra of all people that convince Milton to let it be. A fact that Jin thanks her for while they talk about the bond between driver and blade, the bond which permeates life in Alrest. But Jin notes that Mithra and Adam's relationship isn't quite the same as most. It's not a true soul-to-soul connection. Instead, he feels her true connection or affinity is to be found in the future. But they have to save that future first. As Malos awakens the Titan's true form and the heroes of Torna arrive to stop him, with the sky darkening under a cloud of gargoyles. Mithra summons Ophion to clear them out, but it is overwhelmed and crashes into the cloud sea. Malos taunts them, especially Jin, going on about how Jin knows just as well as he does what humanity is really like, and that annihilation is exactly what they deserve. But before he can get far, both Mithra and Malos pull out the big guns, the Sirens, their most powerful artifices. On the ground, Malos fights Adam and the others. In the sky, the Sirens clash over Torna. But even as they do all in their power to put him down, Malos grows bored. Knowing that Mithra should have just as much power as he does, and when she doesn't show it, he figures the one surefire way to bring it out is to lay waste to the Tornan capital, where Milton and Mikhail are. As sure enough, it works. Filled with despair and anger, Mithra rouses the power of a true Aegis. As far above the sky, something also stirs in response. Mithra's sword changes in Adam's hand into something that even he can't control, and what follows is a battle beyond anything Alrest has seen. The sky and land burn as the Aegises clash, and Malos applauds Mithra on becoming exactly what she was made to be, an instrument for the world's death. But even Malos can't stop what he's started, and the rain of light Mithra brings down burns apart his own siren as he is inside it, and he tumbles down and down into the cloud sea. The fires continue to rage, and Torna lets out its final death cry, while a burst of energy floods the area where Mithra left the others. Instinctually, Hugo jumps in between Adam and the oncoming blast, dying and resulting in both Brigid and Aegeon returning to their cores. 3 deaths in 1 instant, and while Adam is able to get Mithra and the others to safety, Torna the Golden Country sinks forever beneath the cloud sea. Mithra, unable to cope with her actions and the part they played in Milton's death, seals herself further within as her power of light weakens and becomes a smoldering flame. And Pyra is born. Pyra is demure, soft-spoken and kind. Everything Mithra thinks she isn't. With little else left, Adam leaves to hide away the sword manifested by Mithra's prior rampage, as well as seal away the Aegis, Pyra herself, until the day humanity is ready to live alongside her. Minoth vanishes in the aftermath, returning to life as a wandering mercenary rather than returning to Indal to Amalthus. Meanwhile, Laura, Jin, Hayes, and Mikhail travel to meet up with what remains of Adam's militia and send them to Leftheria once all is calmed down. But on the way, they encounter a monster. A monster named Gort. Twisted and deformed, merged with Blade data as an inverse of a flesh-eater, he sought out the one clear memory left in his maddened mind, his hatred for Laura and Jin. Laura finally puts Gort down and lets the memories of her past rest, with a hope for the future, even knowing that peace will not come in the wake of Malos' defeat. They continue forward, to a future that would never be. When they returned to Adam's militia, and while Adam sealed away the Aegis, Amalthus took action. Assassinating the opposition to his power and murdering the Praetor, nothing was left in the way of Amalthus. With the scientist behind Gort's transformation and the surviving Prince Zeder, Amalthus was named Praetor of Indal and began reshaping Alrest. His first act? The extermination of Adam's militia for fear of the Aegis' power, not knowing that it was already sealed. The forces of Indal marched on their holy crusade against the weakened and demoralized militia, turning it into a total massacre, one where Laura was no luckier than anyone else. With a mortal wound and approaching enemies, Laura laments that her death will erase every scrap of memory involving hers and Jin's relationship. But Jin offers a solution passed on from his past self. A way to carve her memory into his heart. With her acceptance, Jin devours her heart and becomes a flesh-eater. But not one like Minoth, but the perfect flesh-eater that Judicium had sought out all those years ago. But Laura remains dead. Hayes returns to her core and is confiscated by Indal, and Mikhail is captured by Indal along with other refugees from Torna. Jin would disappear into obscurity, his last act for several centuries being to burn the scarcely surviving house of Ornelia that floated in the cloud sea on a chunk of the dead Torna, burning the photos of both lives, of both pasts. Mikhail would suffer experimentation under Indal, among many others, as Amalthus sought to perfect the technology first used on Gort, the art of the Blade Eaters, humans merged with blade cores. And he succeeded. The test subjects, Mikhail included, would be discarded, all thought dead. Except even then, Mikhail would persist. As for Hayes, her core would be reawakened, and somewhere in the process, Amalthus would split her core in two, transplanting one half into himself, to prolong his life and confer part of her blade-dampening powers onto himself. Without Torna, a power vacuum would open in Alrest, one soon filled by the empire of Morardane, now ruled by Hugo's brother. What remained of Torna split between the Leftherian archipelago, where Adam would live the rest of his days in a village called Hero's Rest, alongside Azurda in Irrelevance, as well as the Titan Genbu, where the kingdom of Tantal would be established by Prince Zedder, pretending to be descended from Adam. Indal would establish itself above all, creating a new order in which Tantal was leashed by the secrets of their past, and forced to pump out data chips which enhanced blade weapons by sacrificing the ether of their own Titan, making Genbu less hospitable, colder. Furthermore, Amalthus would find and force Ophion to become the guard dog of the World Tree, further preventing anyone from doing exactly what he did in the first place. His final measure would be to make it so all blades and drivers had to be registered by Indal. On a personal matter, Amalthus promoted the cleansing ritual under the pretense that it sanctified and better improved resonance. What it really did was strip the data from within the core crystals, the same data which resulted in complex blades like Jin, Bridget, and others, and resulted in their eventual transformation into Titans. In so doing, he made it so no more Titans could be born. Blades would never develop enough to be Titans, and all the data accumulated would instead go into Amalthus, who is now a Blade Eater. This was the world order Amalthus created, and it is what would remain for the next 500 years, until a lost blade would encounter his old enemy. Time would pass, 500 years, and a young boy and his mother would wash up in Fonset village in Leftheria, once called Hero's Rest. The mother would ask the people to take care of her son, and then she would die. The boy's father would be found a short ways away, having died just barely out of reach of his family. That boy's name would be Rex. Thank you everyone for watching. Xenoblade 2 is an interesting beast compared to the other two in the trilogy. Its themes are predicated on the world's past and history, so before we can even begin explaining the base game, we need to explain the story of Torna. I, of course, have a video on the rest of Xenoblade 2 in the works, and then we're on to Xenoblade 3. After that, I'll edit together a combined video of both Xenoblade 2 videos with some extra stuff I couldn't add for time. And later on, I may even make a supercut of all my Xenoblade videos, in addition to adding a part about the future connected DLC to the first game, which I skipped. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe to help out the channel and to always know when I post next. Make sure notifications are turned on because sometimes YouTube doesn't always keep you posted. I try to post every week on Saturdays, so keep an eye out. A shout out to my patrons, such as my new patrons, Quinn Gable, who read Anne of Green Gables and thought, I can do it better. And so they did. Ranger Man Sam, who is on a 100-game winning streak of Russian roulette. On the downside, they're starting to run out of people to play with. And Thomas Self, who experiences a Jekyll and Hyde situation, except he transforms between his cool self and his even cooler self. I also have memberships alongside Patreon, but both are entirely optional. If you do choose to pay money, you get a shout out from me in the first video after you join, and get to join the wall of cool people here at the end of every video. You also get access to a private Discord server where you can interact directly with me, and be a part of our own little corner of the internet. With that all said and done, I am the Hearth Guy, and I will see you all next time around the hearth. Take a look at this guy's fit. Look at his yee short pants, jank looking vest with that one half sleeve that's not connected to anything. I swear, I can't believe a guy who's dressed like that is about to go save the world. Why do I even try?